IndyCar racing is only 2 weeks away, starting at St. Petersburg, but we're in Florida already as testing for the season has gotten hot and heavy. The first of 2 days in final preparation for the 2022 NTT IndyCar Series. Let's talk about it and let's get into it. So, here I am, and welcome to the digs here at Sebring International Raceway. I love this view. This view means springtime, and it means race cars, the hairpin at Sebring. So, all the cool cats were all out today. 17 driver car combinations took to the track today, and there will be a bunch tomorrow. This, with the limited testing, and I don't want to get into the rant about testing again because, quite frankly, shortly put, testing bans are stupid. Race cars are meant to be on the racetrack. I don't care. It just means the money's going to get funded to simulators rather than actual racing. But I digress. One of the big stories at the beginning of today was that Chip Ganassi Racing is going to not only test, or was not only testing today, but is going to test with all of their drivers tomorrow. And how they pulled this off was, well, they did a driver evaluation. And that driver evaluation was of Kevin Magnussen, who was their full-time IMSA driver last year, raced for them at the Rolex, and has just been announced that he will race for them at the 12 Hours of Sebring. Hey, we're in Sebring. But Kevin has, talked a little bit about doing IndyCar, especially with Ganassi. Obviously, he filled in for Felix Rosenqvist last year. We'll talk about him a little bit later. It wasn't a stellar day for Kevin Magnussen, unfortunately. It's weird too, because I would have thought that he would really get on and be quite quick, but ultimately he was last today, so I don't really know what the situation there was, but essentially Ganassi exploited the same loophole that Penske did to get an extra test day. Penske stuck Dane Cameron, their sports car driver, in here, and then, of course, Ganassi stuck in Kevin Magnussen. Now, this is a bit unrelated to Sebring, but there was a bit of a stern bomb today, and it's not a Kyle Larson video, but I guess we have to talk about the fact that Kyle Larson may well be in the Indy 500, and it will be, if he does do it eventually, it will be supported fully by Hendrick Motorsports. That was a quote from Jeff Gordon today, also mentioning that maybe Hendrick Motorsports will be expanding into other forms outside of NASCAR in motorsport. Now, certainly they have kind of a part-time IMSA deal. They crew the number 48 Allied Bank Cadillac in the IMSA series, but if you think about it, IMSA technically is NASCAR. So that meant a lot of people started kind of going down the rabbit hole of Hendrick Motorsports, IndyCar team, Kyle Larson. I don't know. We'll have to see. There's also the magical 18th Honda that everyone's talking about. And in particular, the thing that I've heard about the 18th Honda for the Indy 500 is that it would go to something major. I was specifically said like Herta. But I wouldn't be surprised if, the opportunity arises where a Honda team is willing to take on Kyle Larson and Hendrick Motorsports. There you go. I had actually heard, just today, that Rahal was looking at potential options to do a fourth team at the Indianapolis 500. The big thing is all about personnel. Will personnel be available? I actually spoke to someone who was affiliated with another team and another driver today, and that was really the big concern with the Indy 500. But let's talk more about Sebring. So, like I said, 17 car driver combinations tested today. Tomorrow you'll be seeing Meyer Shank, Ed Carpenter, and the Ganassi boys. Maybe a few other teams, not really sure. I guess we'll find that out tomorrow. But it's interesting what happened today. So I got a little bit of a leak from this came from a very prominent engineer in the sport. And this engineer does not have a very high opinion of Sebring testing, and was very grumbly, apparently, about how hard the drivers try in this test. So he came up with a trophy, which I guess will be awarded to the driver who ultimately wins the Sebring test. And as you can see, it is the Masturbation Cup. And how appropriate that it's a bunch of, for the most part, a bunch of men here at the racetrack on Valentine's Day that the Masturbation Cup would be awarded. So who won the Masturbation Cup for today? Well, let's take a look at the running order, and oh, wouldn't you believe it? It's Big Chungus, Masturbation Champion, Valentine's Day 2022. But real talk, Colton Herta, man, is this guy on it or what? 3 wins in a row. Obviously, he won the last 2 IndyCar races of last year, taking the Rolex 24 in LMP2, then went over to the Race of Champions and finished second on an ice track to the Scandinavians, and now, of course, he's taken P1 at during testing during Sebring, whether that means anything or not. But I think you should point to P2, and it's a name you might not even know if you haven't been paying too much attention to the offseason. David Malukas, remember that name, 007 off of Colton Herta. You can't even blink that quickly. And that's how close Dave Malukas, driving for Dale Coyne Racing, new partnership with HMD Motorsports. HMD is a trucking company that David's father owns, but clearly Dave is a lot more than just a pay driver getting in there in P2. He was very impressive in Indy Lights. Romain Grosjean was so fast all day. He was pretty much at the top of the board the entire time. Didn't do as many laps as anybody else, and it shows because he's bloody quick. Joseph Newgarden in 4th. Newgarden just a perennial driver, or a perennial fast guy in these sort of cars. And Will Power, who had a new Verizon scheme that you've probably seen at this point, very reminiscent of the Snap-on car from last year. And Graham Rahal, also extremely quick, and looks like the Rahal team is very strong in terms of their street course setup prowess. We move on. Felix Rosenqvist in the Gulf colors. Oh man, that car looked good. Alexander Rossi looked pretty fast throughout the day. Generally speaking, when you ask around, the Andretti Autosport dampers are supposed to be the absolute best setup-wise for the street courses. So not a surprise to see Grosjean, Herta, and Rossi all up there. Scott McLaughlin, kind of caboose on the Penske's, but all the Penske's up there in the top 10. Jack Harvey for the new Hy-Vee-backed number 45 Rahal car. Just right behind him, Christian Lundgaard, who really pounded the pavement, did a lot of laps. Of course, we saw him here the last time I covered one of these tests. And Kyle Kirkwood, who I thought was really impressive throughout the day, didn't ultimately have a great lap time. Well, I mean, great. I mean, look how close the field is, half a second covered. I mean, a second covered the entire field, 1 to 17. But Kyle Kirkwood ultimately was 12th, but I was super impressed with his pace in Foyt. Devlin DeFrancesco there in 13th. Pato O'Ward, who was quick in the morning session, but for whatever reason, that speed just completely evaporated in the second session, and I'm not really sure what happened. I'd love to speak to him at some point to kind of find that out. Callum Ilott seemed to struggle a little bit today. He found some pace later on. And Tatiana Calderon, I have to give a shout-out to her because there's been a lot said about her coming in here, and even with Foyt, she's only a 1/10 of a second off of the Indy Lights champion and extremely highly touted Kyle Kirkwood. So I really have to give credit where credit's due to Calderon. Very, very close to her teammate. And Kevin Magnussen, who just struggled mightily today. It seemed like he was really struggling with his braking points, especially down in the hairpin. Just seemed to miss the apex or would just go off completely quite a bit. did not look comfortable with the car, and we'll kind of have to see tomorrow with the other Ganassi boys to see how they get on, Jimmy and Palou and Dixon and Erickson. But I don't expect there's going to be too much to worry about there with those boys. Wow, it's crazy to me. It's great that IndyCar is actually starting their season kind of early. It's great that it's starting in February rather than mid-March, and then you wait a month, and we're still going to have to wait a month. Don't worry, or don't think that we are not. But it's amazing that IndyCar starts in really, practice is less than a week and a half away, and then of course the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg starts everything off. I just wish, this is the thing, and I mentioned it at the top, with the limited track time these days, and the fact that you had most of the field here, and you will have most of the field here for these 2 days, why is this not more of an event? And I know it's not an official session, but everybody knows this is essentially an official test. This is essentially spring training, or what has taken the place of it. There really needs to be more presence in terms of like social media hype and updates and media presence really here, in my opinion. I shouldn't be, pointing my camera out of a hotel door here. I think, from an IndyCar perspective, from an entertainment perspective, from a momentum perspective, I think we need to do a better job of keeping that momentum for IndyCar going throughout the year, and not just grinding to a halt in September and then just waking up, right before May. I think, and I think tests are a great opportunity to get people hyped. I'm not saying you have to bring IMS Productions out here and do a live stream on YouTube, as much as I would like that to be the case of the entire test session. But I think we need to do a better job of making this an event, making it exciting, and getting people hyped for the season. And I hope this video and my subsequent videos on testing at Sebring are able to do that. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more motorsport content, and we'll see you tomorrow for a half-and-half report here at Sebring, and then I'll be back home again in Indiana to talk about the first practice session for the Daytona 500. We'll see you then.